say I do remember that first game being quite slight.
I was.
I remember early '90s. There was a big. Who had a better body between you and Cooter?
Look, I was quite skinny.
You want to actually answer that question, Mel?
Definitively?
Or Cooter?
Look, he probably eventually had a better body than me, but he used me as a template, right?
Yeah.
So that was, he copied me, but, I forged the way for him.
What about favourite night spot? What would you have said?
The early days, definitely the Metro.
Metro?
Yeah, I used to love the Metro because it was big and spacious, and, we used to get looked after there
Take your top off.
by the managers and the owners. Well, Cooter used to take his top off, but not me. And you sort of tend to go out where you get looked after, and, they looked after us. And also, when you play a game on a Saturday, most games are on a Saturday afternoon back then, you tend to want to go somewhere where it was comfortable, where they sort of say, okay, there's like a VIP area upstairs, and they take you upstairs, and it's away from the real hustle and bustle downstairs. And I don't know if you've been to the Metro back those days, but it had that mezzanine level upstairs, and you can overlook the dance floor, and it was couchy, and it was good.
I've been in the Metro. I didn't get looked after the same way you got looked
well,
after.
That's right.
Sounds like you going there's like Kanye West going.
Well,
who was your crew, Mel? Who would you?
The back line for me when we used to go out was the notorious duo of Curtis Feedis and Chris too.
Wow.
Luke O'Sullivan is a very good friend of mine who used to be part of that.
Yeah.
Silvani used to be lurking around. He'd go wherever he gets looked after as well.
Favourite movie? What would you have said in the player profile back in the late 80s, early 90s?
Probably my two favourites were Deer Hunter and First Blood, which was Sylvester Stallone. And that was a sort of, groundbreaking movie at the time.
And First Blood. All he wanted was a cup of coffee.
That's right.
Could have all been different, Mil.
Well, it's interesting that, Shavy, because we'd go on footy trips, and there were, Craig Bradley and Luke O'Sullivan used to great fans of First Blood as well, and they would just recite what Sylvester Stallone used to say, and the other guy used to say, and they just, word for word, and they just late at night after having a big night on the drink,
Really?
Yeah.
I'm thinking O'Sullivan would have been the Rambo character, and Craig Bradley would have been more like Colonel Troutman.
Well, that's what he was. Yeah. That's what that's the characters they played. Steve DeRuy is one of my best mates.
I love Steve DeRuy.
Steve DeRuy is coming to Melbourne tomorrow.
Really?
He's coming to Melbourne tomorrow. His 50th birthday's coming up.
How does he look?
And we're going out Saturday night with him and Jamie Dunlop. Right. Steve DeRuy is one of my best mates when he was here. Right. He's looking all right. He's in good nick. Big grey, but he's in good nick.
And you're saying that this Saturday night, you, Jamie Dunlop, and Steve DeRuy are out on the town.
We're out.
Oh my God.
We're out on the town, because we were great mates back then, and
people forget his matchups with Mullane, Mil.
Oh, Steve DeRuy. Look, there were a lot of people in Carlton's, and this is the thing about having a club so powerful like Carlton's been. There are people that have come and gone through the club who've probably played 50, 60, 70 games, who've been great players, and probably would have been 200 game players at any other club.
Yep. 1986, your first year.
Yep.
Brewstall's last year.
Yeah.
And
well,
what are your memories of Brewstall?
Well, my memories of him is, and because I revered Brewstall. Brewstall was one of my idols, and to watch him play, and such a calm, cool player, was quiet and just a freak in what he did, and just constantly, just never got beat.
Do you remember him saying anything to you, Mil?
Yeah, look, I remember him saying hi. Hi, see you later. Right?
Wow, that's what
was,
else do you need?
Mate, that was better than a conversation. Brewstall said hi to me.
Yeah. Who was a player that really lifted for the footy trips?
Oh, look, there were a few. There were a few absolute lunatics that go on footy trips. Luke O'Sullivan was one of my best mates. He was a cracker. So he was a beauty. People like Adrian Gleeson, another good friend of mine who just didn't know when to go home ever on footy trips. He just would not know when to go home. We had Tommy Alvin was another one in the early days. He was the same. He just stayed out to all hours.
Wow.
Peter Dean was a bit of a lunatic on footy trips. He was
not as big a surprise, that one there, Mel.
Yeah, Peter Dean was a bit of a lunatic. John Dorotage in the early days. crazy. You know, some of my memories go back to my early footy trips in that golden era of the late 70s, early 80s Carlton team of Jimmy Buckley and all those guys, and you know that crew was crazy. You know.
How do you think Jimmy Buckley and Wayne Johnson would have gone on Twitter?
Well, for starters, I don't know if Jimmy Buckley would have known how to use it, right?
That's a good point.
Or, but you know, Jono's quite clever, so
He would have been all right.
yeah, Jono's very calculating and clever. Jimmy Buckley wouldn't have cared. He would have just done. He would have put.
He would have tweeted.
Who knows? Who knows at 1 a.m. in the morning what the hell he could have put on Twitter, right?
Wow.
But that's, you know, that's Jimmy. I remember one time we were on, where were we? Hawaii, I can't remember where we were. We were somewhere overseas, and he was blind, Jimmy Buckley. He was asleep, and Fraser Murphy was hassling him, you know, because he was rooming with him. He's going, wake up, Bucks, wake up. Anyway, Bucks go, leave me alone. Anyway, he kept hassling him, and Bucks just got up and just knocked him out. He seriously got up and just punched him in the face.
Just knocked Fraser Murphy out on a footy trip.
Yeah, just knocked him out because he was hassling him. That's the kind of stuff he was doing.
Wow.
Poor old Fraser Murphy.
Wow. But no repercussions.
No,
problems,
it was nothing. Oh, what'd you do that for, Bucks?
So, mate, I remember watching you, and then I remember you coming back after the injury, and like you said, you'd had some good time in the gym, and you'd shaved the hair. It was iconic. You know,
well, the shaving it.
Mil, can I just say this? You're a beautiful man.
Yeah, thank you very much. You're a good judge. But, you know, the shaving the hair thing was funny because the blokes at Carlton, like my teammates that I looked up to and idolised, were telling me for a few years before that, they said, get rid of that, because I had the tufts of hair. Remember the tufts of hair I had? I looked like Don King, right? And they said...
Don King?
Yeah.
I was going to say, do you remember a wrestler called The Missing Link?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I thought, you always reminded me a bit of him with that in the old days.
And you know the funny thing, when you got those few little hairs, you want to keep those few little hairs, and I look back and thinking, what was I thinking, right?
Well, you look it's such a good look for you now.
So I remember them players saying, Mil, just get rid of it. I said, oh. And then one night before an exhibition game in London, we used to play those games in London.
Yeah.
I went around to a mate of mine who I grew up with as a kid, who was a hairdresser. And I went to his place that night and I said, take it all off. So he shaved my head that night. So I turned up to the airport with no hair, and the teammates just went ballistic. Just raw when I walked in there. And I never looked back since, right?
Good decision, Mil.
Best decision I ever made, right?
Did you play in the Battle of Britain?
Yeah, I played that game.
The Battle of Britain is almost as interesting to me as the 95 granny, but what are your memories of the Battle of Britain?
For a young kid, I would say it was a bit intimidating. Yeah. I couldn't say it wasn't, because if I was a 28-year-old, you know, if I was playing in that game as a player who'd played 150 or 200 games, probably wouldn't have affected me as much. But as being a young kid and just coming through, thinking, wow, this is quite, you know, and
just spot fires all over the ground.
All over the place. And you sort of, you know, you're trying to go in there and trying to break things up. And I wouldn't have regarded myself as an aggressor in terms of the way I played or anything like that. And, you know, I was more of, you know, diffuser of things where, you know, some players, you know, the Jimmy Buckleys and the Reece Joneses were probably more into that. So it was difficult, you know, to come from a background where you sort of loved your footy and you played your footy, and all of a sudden you're confronted with this, and how do you deal with this? Do you go out and do you knock someone out, and is that the way to go? And I was a bit confused as to what to do, really, you know. So, yeah, it was
confusing to watch.
These days it would have been quite distressing for a lot of people.
Thanks for driving me around, mate.
Mate, it's been a pleasure, right? As I said, you know, I love the club, and, you know, anytime I've got a chance to sit down and reflect on my good times and my, you know, glory days, you know, I love to. So, as I said, you know, the club's always going to have a special place in my heart.
I will finish with this.
Yep.
Please say hello to Steve DeRui for me.
Oh, I certainly will. I'll be seeing him Saturday night, I'll tell him. We'll be having a great night, and we'll be reflecting.